Okay, kids, it's time for another episode of the Fueled by Weird podcast, the only podcast capable of spinning straw into gold. I'm Chris Daly, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with the founder of Biting Comics, writer Ben Lacy. Ben, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for stopping by. All right, so usually what I like to do when I'm meeting someone new for the first time is we'll ask them a icebreaker question just to kind of,
Sure.
break the ice. So today's question is, if you were a refrigerator, what item would you hate keeping inside of you?
Um, Probably blue cheese. Something that smells.
That's a good one. I think for me, I'd probably pick something fishy. Just no seafood.
That's a good choice too.
No seafood. That'll be mine. All right. So, with the concept of fueled by weird, basically is, any of the things that you're into, whether they're typically nerdy or not, that
Mhm.
make up who you are as a person. So,
Right.
what are some of the things that you're into that feel you're weird?
Oh, well, first off, of course, comic books.
Absolutely.
I've been, I'm pushing a little under 60 here, and I've been reading them for since the 70s. So I've
Nice.
been around for quite a while. So I'm always into comic books. My kids have gotten me into a few different anime and manga stuff, like
Nice.
I've One Punch Man, and
That's a good one.
ones that are a little more superhero like My
Yeah.
Hero Academia, One Punch
Oh,
Man.
My
Uh,
Hero is my favorite. I love My Hero so
and
much.
then, I watched some of Hunter v Hunter. And,
Nice.
right now we were watching some of that Netflix live One Piece adaptation.
Is it pretty good?
The first episode was pretty good. I mean, I'm not, I watched some of the, One Piece was one of the animes I tried, and I wasn't, a huge, it wasn't great. And for me, I know
Yeah.
a lot of people really love it.
Yeah.
But I actually, the adaptation moves a little quicker in terms of, in the first episode probably covers, 5 or 6 episodes of the cartoon.
Yeah.
Sorry, the anime.
Oh, you're
and
good.
so I think that worked better for me, because Luffy's character can be he can get on your nerves a little bit if you're not into it.
Yeah, for sure.
he's
I
a
mean,
he's a very over the top kind of guy.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've just recently started watching the anime because I wanted to familiarize myself with it before I watched the live action. So
Yeah,
I wanted to watch enough of the anime to be able to not have anything spoiled in the live action. And I need to get through, it was about like 61-ish episodes. I think
I don't know.
I'm through like 40 right now. And yeah, I've heard that one episode of the live action covers several episodes of the anime because,
Right.
like you said, there is a lot of filler where you'll have, 10, 15 episodes covers one battle just because they cover the battle piece by
Yeah.
piece. So yeah, I mean, it definitely is a genre one for sure. You have to kind of very much be into pirates and stuff like that. And yeah, Luffy at sometimes can be a little bit much, but yeah, yeah. I can't say I'm big in anime, but I'm kind of like you. I'm older getting into anime. It's not something I was into
Yeah.
much as a kid, but I'm kind of getting more into it now. And I know like you said, the more superhero ones are more that ones that I lean more into, like One Punch Man and My Hero,
Hmm.
which is My Hero Academia is one of my favorite
Right.
shows. Um, but yeah, I've just been kind of just testing the waters on anime myself, so that's cool. What's some other stuff you're into?
Well, I try to work out regularly. I like to travel. I'm getting close to the retirement age from my day job, so we're traveling more. In fact, I just went to Israel, which kind of tied in nicely to the comic book that I'm doing right now.
Nice.
Um, so I like to do that. Um, do some I'm trying to do a lot more reading, and sci-fi and historical fiction, historical nonfiction, because I try to put some reality into some of the comic books like Samson, where they're based on some somewhat real events.
Yeah, that's cool. So, speaking of comic books, I mentioned you're a comic book writer. What was it that got you into writing comics in the first place?
It's just,
Or even, I guess, even
even when I was a teenager, I wanted to. I think I sent off something to Marvel proposing proposing a comic book. This was like in the early '80s, and I'm sure I didn't even know how to do it. I think I didn't even send them. You're supposed to send like a return envelope and things like that. I didn't do any of that. I just sent them my pitch, and they were nice enough to send me back a rejection letter. But I guess I've always, I've been writing, regular, I've written some prose fiction and things like that. And then I always wanted to do a comic book. And when I came up with the idea of Shark of War, which is my other series, the one I first did, um, I thought, at first I was just thinking it was going to be a short story. But then I started realizing it might be better as a comic book. And there was this, I discovered some of these online, software tools like Daz 3D, GIMP, Flip Studio Paint. And I was like, I bet I could just barely do the art well enough to make this a comic book. And that's where I started with Shark of War. And now I'm on my seventh issue, and I've had other people take over the art because I think there are better people to do the art than me.
yeah.
And then for Samson, I'd have somebody else doing the art because the Shark of War using the 3D art stuff worked pretty well for a shark. But once you start looking at people, it's kind of looks weird as a comic book. It's good for video games, but for some reason, you want a comic book to be almost more like hand drawn style.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, that's cool that you were able to make the transition from prose to comics because I consider myself a prose writer, and
Mm-hmm.
I think doing comics would be really fun to do. I just haven't been able to figure out how to convert from prose to scripting. And everyone says it's so easy, but from the people I've talked to, it's not as easy as everyone says.
You
And it
you
could just
really have
be,
to
go ahead.
you really have to think more about the panel by panel how you want it to look. It's not it's a little like being a movie director and a writer. You don't have to do as much like when you're writing prose. You have to give these detailed descriptions of backgrounds. Like the green blue sky, the lush green trees, the flowers were in bloom, stuff like that. And you just in a comic, you don't have to. You just kind of write there's a nice background and the artist will fill it in. But you have to kind of think about each shot, that's going to be on page. This shot is going to show this. This shot is going to show that because I only have 5 or 6 panels. In most cases, to get across in each page what I'm trying to get across. So you're kind of like a little bit of a mini movie director while you're also the writer. Um, so doing the art on my first books, Shark of War, was probably helpful in that because I had to like imagine the panels and then take my own script to decide how I was going to make things look on the page.
Nice. And yeah, that's what I've kind of gotten from most people is it's not as easy as everyone says. And really it could just be me overthinking it, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing is just, like I've gotten a lot of advice regarding that there's really not a right or wrong way to do a script as long as
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense to you and as long as it makes sense to the artist. All right,
Right.
so with all the comics you've had, Shark of War, Cthulhu Man, the Vicious Vixens, and Samson, when you go to write, where are you pulling your ideas from? How are you inspired by to create some of these really colorful characters?
Well, a lot of it's kind of like one thing springs from another. For example, for Shark of War, the Meg had come out about the same time I got the idea. And the Meg is, a lot of people love the Meg, and
Yeah,
and I don't want to knock it. It's a fun movie, but it's basically the same shark movie you always see. It's just a bigger shark killing people.
right.
And I was like, well, what if I flipped that? What if the shark was a good guy, and what if there was a way he'd get out of water without having a tornado carry him, for example. And then I thought about a military experiment, which there's some precedent where the Navy, different militaries have tried to use things like dolphins and stuff for military purposes. So
Yeah.
it kind of went from there. And then for example, for the Vicious Vixens, there was a scene in Shark of War One where he stops a gang of human traffickers who are smuggling these women, but he doesn't, he just kind of stops them and flies off and leaves the women there fending them for themselves. And thinking about it later, and it's like, I wonder what happened to those women. You know, there could be a story for it. And I started thinking of like an A-Team meets Charlie's Angels kind of scenario.
Oh, nice.
And similarly for the Cthulhu Man, it kind of sprang out from a follow up to this as well, because the evil scientist who created the Shark of War, she's going to want to do some more experiments. So I started thinking about what she would do. And Lovecraft, as you may know, on Kickstarter is kind of a big thing. There's a lot of people who are Lovecraftian fans. So I'm like, oh, how can I integrate a Lovecraft concept with my concept of a spinoff? Now for Samson, that was actually one of my earliest, ideas, and it's been, sitting around forever. And I occasionally update it and polish it off and think about it. But the superhero market is, very competitive, so I was a little worried about trying to do anything with it. Now that I'm, getting a little bit better audience, I was hoping maybe I can finally do it, because I'd always had this idea. I wanted to create a superhero, and I was, you know, I am Jewish on my mother's side. They came out of the Ukraine before World War II, and I was always thinking, a Samson and a Jewish superhero and somebody who's been an experiment by Nazis. That seems like you think somebody would have thought of that by now,
Yeah.
but because we have Captain America as a super soldier who is an experiment here in this country.
Yeah.
The idea that the Nazis wouldn't be doing the exact same thing, and the idea that they wouldn't be experimenting, on prisoners in concentration camps is in fact what they did. They did experiment on prisoners in concentration camps, which is one of the background realities of the story. Of course, they didn't actually do anything. For the most part, they didn't do anything useful with those experiments. They just tortured people
Right.
with bad science. But in this case, they do something, but it winds up going badly for them, because they create somebody who's going to be their nemesis. And then, of course, he goes on to, he's a child during the World War II time frame, but he gets superpowers then, and it carries through as it's kind of an epic storyline, because it follows through 50 years to the end of the Cold War, when East Germany's getting opened up, and some of the records that of what happened are being revealed, and they're starting to realize that maybe this super soldier program hasn't died. Maybe there's more of these Nazis now going to be created with superpowers. And it ties in also with the hunt for a Nazi war criminal that they find evidence is still alive in the United States, and he starts to try and go after him. And that's kind of the focus of the first issue.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got a chance to read that Ashcan, and I was reading through, and I'm like, oh man, this is it. I need more of this book. It's so
Thank
good.
you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm moving a little out of my my normal audience's expectations. So I'm really hoping to bring in new people, who may be more superhero fans than they are sci-fi, shark fans, because I've kind of built an audience around that. So I need to get more people in. So I'm really glad you said that.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen conversations lately, among, other comics folks about how there needs to be more Jewish representation in comics. So I think, it's coming around at a perfect time. I mean, Samson's a great character, with the little bit I've seen of him so far.
Yeah.
Like you said, he's very reminiscent of Captain America, and it makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't other countries be experimenting with the exact same thing, or, other places? It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's kind of an irony of the comic book world. The most of the greatest comic book writers are Jewish. Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, the list goes on and on
Yeah.
and on. And but most of their characters, Siegel Schuster, most of their characters were not. In fact,
Right.
some of them are only kind of like retcon, like the Thing, always a stand-in for Jack Kirby, but he's only officially Jewish in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Same with Kitty Pryde. Um, you know, Similarly, and the thing about those characters is, that doesn't really, they could or could not be Jewish, and it wouldn't really change them that much. Samson's obviously his origins tied up to the fact that he was a Jewish kid who was brought to Auschwitz at the start of World War II and experimented on. So
Yeah.
that identity is unique to his creation, and ties into it.
Yeah, definitely. So, you mentioned you have Samson on Kickstarter now. For those that aren't familiar with Samson already, why don't you share a little bit about, what Samson's about, kind of what to expect with the Kickstarter?
Sure. Samson is basically the Nazis who really did experiment on kids, especially twins. They take two twin brothers, Samuel and Saul, and they start using them as guinea pigs for their Nazi super soldier effort, Project Uberfuhrer. And as we start in issue 1, we're kind of going flashing back to World War II when this is happening to him and his brother. At the same time, in the 1990s, when the Cold War has ended, he as an adult is finding out that one of these Nazi super soldiers, may still be alive thanks to documents uncovered by the reunification of Germany that happened in the early 90s. So he's got to go off and try and find this person, while at the same time we're finding about what happened to him in World War II to give him these powers and abilities. So it's basically the first issue will cover, his hunt, his origin, and his hunt for in the present or near present for this Nazi super soldier who is still living in America. It's been hiding all these years and trying to capture him. Then the series will go on from there, cover the events that happen subsequently to that. If it funds,
Yeah.
I have at least 6 issues planned out for this, covering this first story arc. And I think the character can go on, as a continuing kind of superhero character in this universe.
Yeah, definitely. Now,
And
oh, go ahead.
And as you mentioned, if you go to the Kickstarter page, there's a link to the Ashcan version. You don't have to sign up for anything, you don't have to do anything. Just click on it, and the PDF pops up, and you can read the first 8 pages of the story. And there's also cover art. Plus, there's a bonus feature talking about the real life people who were inspired this, including the 2 villains of the story, who were actual Nazi scientists who were experimenting on people in concentration camps.
Yeah. And that was really cool. There's the part about where you showed, who the characters are based on. And you were totally right. You look at this guy, you're not going to see this handsome guy as some creepy guy. You're going to want to go a little bit more crazy just to have that believable factor of a mad scientist.
Yeah, well, I mean, the people, when people think of scientists experimenting on people in Nazi, they always think of Mengele, who was kind of a handsome guy, and but he wasn't the only one. And when I
Right.
started researching it, I found these 2 other guys who were just much more scary, and they were actually maybe more vindictive in their actions. And one of them, he actually got his medical license back and got to practice, and he lived to like 90. And I was like,
Yeah, that
yeah,
was crazy.
that's not an example of fairness in life. And if you look at that picture of him, he is nightmarishly scary.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you had mentioned before that, your books kind of take a jumping point off of one another. Are you planning on any kind of like a shared universe with all your books, or is it just kind of a
I
coincidence that they kind of spring off of each other?
I think there's kind of the Shark of War universe, and, which has the Vicious Vixens and the Cthulhu Man, and then the Samson universe will be separate. I do have ideas for other characters spinning off of this,
Okay,
and we'll probably meet some of them in issue 2 as well. But it's more, the Shark of War universe is kind of a little more grounded in terms of the level of powers. I mean, the shark is, his ability to fly and stuff is, and the fact that he's armored is probably the high point in technology, except for the Cthulhu Man. There's just a
sure.
few people with powers and abilities, whereas the Samson universe will be a little more like not a Marvel universe in terms of zillions of people having powers, but more like kind of a Silver Age kind of universe where there's like dozens of people who have powers and abilities and stuff. So it'll be a higher power level universe, where the people have, there are multiple people with superpowers, there are super villains and stuff like that. It's a little more of a traditional comic book universe and not as grounded in a kind of a lower tech level.
Gotcha. So anyone expecting Shark of War to come, give Samson an assist are going to be very disappointed.
Unless they do one of those crossover
Yeah.
crisis of multiple universe kind of events that
Right.
the comics occasionally have. But yeah, the one thing I don't like about the Marvel and DC universes of now is there's just so many super powered people. It's like you probably walk out in the street and bump into three. Especially in the Marvel universe where so many people
Yeah.
are mutants now that there's just it's just takes you. It kind of takes the specialness away and also takes the sense of danger away when there's so many people who have powers and abilities and stuff. So I'd like like I said, a more Silver Age level where there were a number of them, but it wasn't like everybody. It wasn't just overly done. But on the other hand, for the Shark of War universe, I want to have a more of a street level kind of level of for abilities. I don't want to have Superman type people or Samson type people with those kind of incredible strength and powers.
There's like heightened abilities, but not
Yeah,
necessarily like
yeah, the
freak
Cthulhu Man is
accident.
probably the top guy, in terms of powers because of his mind control abilities and stuff like that. But I don't want to have the universe, subject to superhero fights like that.
Gotcha. Now you had said you have 6 issues planned out for Samson. Do you plan on like, and I know it probably depends on whether or not it funds or not, or even finds an audience, because I know
Right.
sometimes that can be an issue, regardless of what the topic of the comic is or the subject of the comic. Um, would it go past the 6 issues? Do you have like further story arcs to like
Oh yeah,
really far?
I think I could do this character like you did like Stanley did Spider-Man. I could
Oh,
come
okay.
up with more. I have the right now I have a story arcs I want to tell, but I think I could do multiple stories of of this character. I have like I said, I have spin-off ideas, and I envision the universe being a larger superhero universe with other super soldiers, good and bad, with other superpowered people. As we go through the years, in the next issue, we're going to see him, eventually back in Israel because he's taking the Uberfuhrer to trial. There'll be his enemies, and his friends and things like that.
Plus, I mean, you mentioned, why wouldn't Israel or even, the Germans be working on a super soldier project? Who knows? There might be other countries that were working on super soldiers that Samson might run into.
Right.
Very cool.
And and since it covers many years, because like I said, I kind of view this as an epic that starts with his origin and comes up through his adulthood.
Yeah.
There's years worth of characters they'll pop in and out, and his own family, of course, has been affected by what's been done to him. So some of
Yeah.
his relations we may see that what happens to them because of his genetics.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So, after this Kickstarter is done for Samson, what do you have next lined up? Is that stuff you can talk about? Like
Oh
what?
yeah, Shark of War Sevens. I kind of do this thing where I try to have 8 pages of art, and story done and lettered, and make an ash can of them. And I've almost got that for Shark of War Seven. So
Oh,
I'm
nice.
hoping to launch Shark of War Seven, maybe a month or two after this Kickstarter. I try to a couple times now I've been trying to put them very close together, and then physical backers who back one, I give them a discount on the next one.
Oh, nice.
Basically a rebate at the end of it. So I'll just hold their rewards and ship them all off together, so they get a discount and I save on shipping because obviously one of the cost limitations of doing Kickstarter is the expensive shipping.
Oh, for sure.
It's not like you just go to the comic book store and pick up your books. You have to ship them off, and it's at least $4 of cost for packaging and shipping a book. So if they're going to buy my second book and I combine them together, I give them a discount. So everybody who backed the Vicious Vixens, which finished a couple months ago and is almost ready to print, I told them, if you back Samson at a physical level, I'll at the end of the campaign, I'll rebate $7 to you and
Nice.
15 for international backers. So basically they get their books a little later. They all get them all together, and I save on shipping. And their second book, Samson, will now basically be half price if they want the lowest physical level of the book.
Yeah, definitely. I was gonna say, with expensive as it is shipping in the States, I'm sure shipping international is I've heard it's a nightmare sometimes.
Oh yeah, if you go through Pirate Ship, I sometimes use that because they do have a cheaper option. So you can find a little bit cheaper, but yeah, anything, even a single floppy overseas is probably going to cost you $12 to $15 to ship it.
Wow.
You have to charge a lot for shipping. It could be even more if you go to Australia or something.
Yeah.
But then there's also, if somebody orders a big lot, then you get into weight limits too, and prices could even go surprisingly high. I've spent 30 or $40 on shipping to, something to people in Australia, for example.
Oh wow.
But, I charge them for it, because, as part of the, upfront, I have an estimate of what it's going to cost. And sometimes
Yeah.
I'm off a little bit, sometimes I'm on. But that dealing with that is an expense, and that means that I get very few international backers for physical media because they paying an extra 15, $20 for a comic book. Single comic book's a lot.
Yeah, they're paying
So
for the price essentially.
so most of the people who back for foreign get a digital copy, and that's $5, and I
Yeah.
just email it off. It's a PDF. I always do extra stuff in my PDFs. For example, there's some bonus features. You saw the one in the ash can. There'll probably be at least one more. I always, in Shark of War, I usually do a science of the Shark of War because I'm an engineer by trade. So I always do
Nice.
something about the science behind his weaponry, or the science behind his ability to fly. How he converts the people he eats into fuel for his jet engines, for example. That was a fun one to write.
I bet.
Basically, turning human flesh into shark oil, and turning shark oil into jet fuel.
Man.
So that's kind of, there's always something like that in my digital editions. I think I sent you a link to all of them. So if you kind of look in the back of the comics, you'll
Yeah.
see the Science of Shark of War bonus.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but I definitely will.
But sorry. So yeah, so
Oh, you're good.
that's kind of what I want to try to add for that. And so my digital editions are always cheap, and if I make goal, I always add in other people get their digital books, so I also add in some other digital books as well for people.
Very cool. All right. Well, it's been great talking with you. Let's go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, let's wrap things up. If you do you have any advice you'd give to up and coming creators, or creators that maybe are just haven't started doing their thing yet, that just need a little bit of motivation?
Yeah, if you're gonna do a Kickstarter, if you're planning to go through Kickstarter, I mean, maybe you have an in at Marvel or something like that, in which case I'd recommend that route. But if
Yeah.
you're planning to do a Kickstarter, you need to start building up an audience. So you have to have some social media, start an email list, so you can start promoting yourself, get people on your email list, and then then the key is, if you want to make a comic book, the key is to make a comic book. A lot of people talk about wanting to make a comic book, but you just basically just have to sit down and do it. And like I said, I did my first 5 issues. In fact, I did the art and the writing for them all myself. But you can find an artist who will work for you. I mean, you'll have to pay them. There's very few artists who are going to work, for profit sharing, or for anything that. So if you do want to hire an artist, you just expect to pay them. mean, there are Facebook groups where you can find artists on and things like that. There are groups on Facebook for, for Kickstarter, for your fellow Kickstarter creators, where other
Yeah.
people will share your stuff out, and I'm on obviously a number of them, and it'll also give you advice on where to print your book, and who to go to for colorist or letterer, things like that if you need other services. Um, so yeah, that's my big advice. Start working on building up your fan base, and then just make the comic book. And if you want, you can, like I said, because I did the art on my own. My first Kickstarter goal was really low, relatively speaking, but it was still hard to hit. And this comic book's outside my normal wheel space, so it's probably gonna be hard to make this goal too. But that's just gotta keep plugging away.
That's great advice. Don't give up and just don't be afraid to do it. Just do it. If you want
Yeah.
to do something, just go out there and get started. Good advice. All right. Well, where people want to know more about Samson, if people want to know about, keep up on what's coming from you, where can they find you?
Well, if they go to bitingcomics.com, they can sign up for my email list, and they'll get like my first two issues of Shark of War free, the PDF of them. They'll also get the Samson ash can and the Vicious Vixens ash can, to look at. If they'd like to help back Samson, samson.bitingcomics.com will take them to the Kickstarter page. That's my shortened link. There's a longer link, obviously, from Kickstarter for it, that will take them to it. I'm on Shark Comics on Facebook and Lacy1 on Twitter.
Perfect. And then when we put this out, we'll definitely make sure to put a link to get people going to where they need to go.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And to find us when this article posts, all sorts of other nerdy news to keep up on, you can check out our website at geek-network.com. We're at Geeks AZ on Twitter and Instagram, Geek Network on Facebook. On Instagram, I am CD is weird. The music from the show is by Polygon Horizon. They're a great band. Go check them out on Bandcamp. The logos for the show are done by my friends Chris Chandler and Mike Belcher. Also, two great comic guys. Go check them out on all the social medias. And if you like the show, please leave a review and tell your friends. Word of mouth is our friend. And remember, kids, to embrace the things that fuel your weird and always geek responsibly. Ben, thank you so much for coming today.
Well, thank you.